Welcome to Amplify, a podcast series by the Association of Accounting Marketing. I'm Scott Dine, Technical Director with Catalyst Group Marketing, and I'm your host for today's session. Joining me today is Scott Moore. Scott is a Senior Vice President at the Rainmaker companies. Prior to joining the Rainmaker companies, Scott served as CMO for a top 20 U.S. accounting firm for over 14 years, and is a former AIM president. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be with you.
So today we're going to be talking about vital skills of growth leadership in accounting firms. Scott, could you give us some of your insight into what these skills are and how they might apply to our listeners?
Sure, Scott. Well, over the years that I've been in the industry, I've had the great fortune of getting to know a lot of marketers, business developers, and leaders of practices, firms of all sizes all over the country. And one of the things that I find is consistent is that all the roles are really different. You know, even with the same title, you might have two marketing directors whose roles look very different. But what I do tend to see is that the ones who are most successful, seen in leadership positions in their firm and really having a true impact are the ones who have a holistic perspective on growth and what it takes to grow a firm. They may be inherently a business developer or a marketer or even a practitioner, but they have a fundamental concept, at least, of what marketing and business development is and how they link together and how they roll up and contribute to where their firms are headed. And so the three key skills that we will focus on in terms of growth leadership are the ability to craft a growth plan. It's managing a sales process and coaching strategic pursuits.
Yeah, now, there's no doubt that having a plan is important, but how does an effective growth leadership approach the planning process?
Well, I like to look at growth planning or growth plans having three key qualities. They're strategic, they are straightforward, and they're collaborative. So what do I mean by that? So strategic is the alignment tactics that come out of the plans with where the firm really is headed, where it wants to go. And that is really at three levels. You know, it's the overall firm level, then drilling down to the industry niches and the service lines and the geographic markets, and then down to the individual level, because that's really where the action is, right? It's where individuals play their part in whatever aspect of the firm that they relate to. So that's very important. The fact that they need to be straightforward. That means, you know, Scott, you've probably, like me, you've probably seen a lot of strategic plans, planning documents. Sometimes they're really beautiful. They're in nice binders, and people get really excited about them, and then they might go on a binder shelf and collect a lot of dust, right? So that really tells me that the best plans are the ones that are straightforward, they're concise, they're not very tedious, you know, so you can really act on them. They're hard-hitting, very clear, and every individual can understand the role they play in it. And then the collaborative piece is really saying that, you know, a good plan is not created in isolation with two or three people off in a room or one person banging it out on their computer. It's really important to get all of the key stakeholders in a room together and facilitate them. And that's a key word there. It's great to have presentation skills, but I think even more important to have good facilitation skills, because facilitating really positions you as a leader who brings people together and gets buy-in on the spot. You know, rather than create the plan and then after the fact, you got to work on getting that buy-in. You know, if you bring people together in the beginning, you're going to have that buy-in from the time the gate opens, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So strategic, straightforward, and collaborative, very important keys.
Excellent. So what does a strategic growth plan look like in your view?
Yeah, well, I would first say that no two growth plans really look the same from one firm to another. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It needs to fit the firm, but there are certain core components that are important that for every growth plan to have in order for it to be effective. And, it starts with goals, and goals have to tie to where the firm wants to go. A great way to facilitate that is using a tool like a gap analysis. Some of the listeners may be familiar with a gap analysis. It's looking at the current state. Where are we today in terms of our revenue, and how is it broken up by industry, service, geography? What are our strengths and weaknesses? And so you can do a SWOT analysis as part of that, a subset. And then looking at the future state, and that's envisioning in the context of that current state, where would we like to see that in 3 to 5 years from now? And then the magic really happens in between. It's the gap, and it's the reason that you call it the gap analysis. It's finding those key initiatives, the key areas to focus your strategies around, obstacles to break down, barriers to tackle. And that is a very effective process that then leads you to understanding, okay, if these are our goals, this is where we're headed, what does that ideal target look like? So identifying targets, and that's really in 2 stages too. It's first, what are the attributes to pull the data with? It's the easy stuff. It's we want this industry, we want this revenue, we want this geography. But then once you pull that data, you might have a list of 100 or 300 or 500. That's too many to work effectively through the entire process. You can obviously do mass marketing to that, but when you really want to drill it down to strategic pursuits, you've got to go through some prioritization. And then, you can use criteria and rank based on the criteria. Things like, what kind of access do we have into the organization? Can we pick up the phone and call and get a meeting very easily? Do we have any relationship momentum? Do we know anything about about the needs or the service deficiencies they're currently getting? So that's the relational type stuff that we need to know that you don't find in a database, right?
Sure.
So you prioritize that information, sift up your highest ranking targets to the top, put them in tier 1, and you might have, say, 3 tiers. And so, you might have a list of 300, but you've got that top tier of, say, 8 to 10 that are going to eventually turn into those strategic pursuits. And we talked about the ties between marketing and sales, and this is where it can really start to show up, because the more traditional marketing type initiatives, your social media, search engine optimization, thought leadership, content marketing campaigns, those are great to try to bring a larger community of prospects up into the realm of those high potential, high ranking targets that need those really focused pursuits. So that's the strategy development piece. So we've been through goals, targets, we've got strategies applied to the various levels of targets, and then we get to the resources. What's it going to take in terms of people, dollars, time? We build our action plans in that stage. So the project managers out there can keep people on task and accountable to fulfill the strategies. And then finally, put a wrapper on the growth plan with a discussion around success factors. What are those 3 to 5 key things that just have to happen, have to take place in order for us to be successful with this?
Excellent. Okay, so if managing the sales process is a vital skill, what does a sales process or a good sales process look like, and why is it important to have one?
Sure. Well, a sales process is really important, and not just to people who would consider themselves in a sales role. A sales process really is the backbone to the overall growth effort. So if you're a business developer, you kind of live and breathe by a sales process. If you're a marketer, then a sales process really helps you link all of the key marketing initiatives and tactics to the sales process to demonstrate how all of those efforts are driving results in terms of revenue actually coming into the firm. So, another way to look at it is it's like a playbook. So if you think of any team sport, a good team has a great coach. And so a growth leader is that coach who needs the playbook to use consistent language and terminology, maybe tools and templates, so that when they are guiding that team through, and they may have different roles in the sales process, but having that playbook is very important. So the phases may look different, just like the parts of a growth plan. But there are some commonalities that you should find in any sales process, whether you have created it inside your firm or you subscribe to one outside or have had help creating one. It's basically you have to identify and qualify your targets. There's a discovery process where you're engaging with the target or the prospect to uncover what their key needs are. Then you get into a collaborative phase where you're co-developing what the solution will be that turns into your proposal. And then finally, it's getting all the right votes in the organization lined up to close the deal.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, you really have those key phases, and you might have it broken further out into 8 phases or 5, whatever. But the bottom line there is have a process, have terms, a language that you can use when you're working with your groups.
That's terrific advice right there. Okay, so once we have the sales process in place, what are some techniques for managing it?
Sure. Well, Scott, I don't know about you, but I'm a visual person. It helps me to see things graphically. I don't like to really go through a ton of data and lists. If I can see it simplified in a visual form. So that would be one key thing I would suggest is use a common one would be a funnel. Think of a sales funnel where you're identifying, qualifying targets, and they start at the top of the funnel and you're working them through to a win. I think it's great when you can pull a team together on a regular basis, have a funnel diagram up on the wall, and you're plotting your opportunities in the various phases. And then you can do things like this. You can ask the team, all right, what is our funnel telling us? For example, you might have a concentration up at the top of the funnel. So that might be telling you that you're doing great in engaging your prospects early on, but we need to find new ways to bring them through and uncover things that we can work on with them. If you've got a bottom-heavy funnel, that could be telling you that you're having trouble getting the votes aligned and closing deals. You might have some holistic perspective on what your funnel's telling you, but you can also ask great questions like, what new ones are we plugging in? Which ones have moved? We can even color code them. So you might have green, yellow, red, referring to the level of momentum. Like the green ones are moving nicely. The yellow ones might need a little push. The red ones are just stalling out. So it just gives you a great tool to have these conversations around how are we doing in moving our pursuits through the funnel.
Okay, those are some great techniques. Thanks. So the third vital skill area you mentioned is the ability to coach strategic pursuits.
Mhm.
How do you identify when a pursuit is strategic?
Well, I would refer back to what we were talking about earlier with target identification and then prioritization. So if you've gone through a process and you've identified, say, your top 8 to 10 targets who are ranking high because you've got that easy access, a lot of potential, multiple services, there's a really strong chance you can close something in, say, the next 30, 60, maybe 90 days. So those are the attributes of the ones that might sift to the top. Those are the ones that, if we're talking about growth planning at different levels, you've got firm, niche, individual. There's really another plan, and that's the pursuit plan. So when you get a pursuit up to this level, it really calls for its own plan. Put a team on it, facilitate them. Here's that facilitation skill again. So,
okay, great. So what advice do you have for how to coach teams around these pursuits to help them really win the business?
Yeah, I would say that I like to look at it as a process of taking inventory of what we know, maybe more importantly, what we don't know. Those important things that we need to learn, if we get out in front of that, it can really give us the edge. But you can go through a flow or a template. And once again, it can be a great planner you could put on a wall with your team or on a placemat document. Get everybody together and take inventory of, okay, everybody, what's our relationship history? Have we done work for them? Do we know, individually, do we have any social relationships in this prospect? Things like, what's the problem that we're trying to solve, if we know that yet? What are the criteria that the prospect, we expect the prospect to use to make a decision? What's the competitive landscape? And how do we stand? Are we, ahead of the curve? Are we, behind the plate on that one? So, team members and roles, we've got to put a great team together and get the right group plugged in on it. Decision. We need to know who in the prospect organization, who's making decisions, who are the influencers, who are the users, and are they advocates? Are they detractors? Are they supporters? Going back to that idea of the need to be visual, it's great to put a map up. So usually, a lot of times they're large organizations, lots of people, lots of influence coming from different parts. Sometimes the unexpected areas of the firm, it may not necessarily follow an org chart. We need to know that, who's influencing this thing, and how can we position our team to be as competitive as possible. Now, I would say too that we need to know who our coaches are. Coaches can be people inside and outside the organization to help us get the door. We've got to put a strong value proposition together. And then here's something that once you've taken that inventory, we have to look at ways to really get distinctive, to be distinctive, to bring innovation that the competition likely is not. And that might be around areas such as, how can we create more chemistry, through social interaction and likability? How can we bring more relevant perspective and bring some things that may resonate more with the target? How can we demonstrate that we are collaborative, that we don't just present a solution, we work on the solution with the prospect, and just demonstrate that we work well as a team. So if you've got multiple services potentially at play, and you're bringing people in from different parts of the firm, you got to demonstrate that you're not just putting a group together, you're putting a team together that's going to work well in the best interest of the prospect. So those are some of the things that we would look at for coaching strategic pursuit.
That's terrific. That's excellent advice. Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you very much for joining us today, Scott. You've shared a lot of great information with our viewers and on developing valuable business development leadership skills.
Great, Scott. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So this wraps up another episode of Amplify. Please watch for another podcast from the Association of Accounting Marketing next month. Don't forget, you can check us out and all of our past episodes online at accountingmarketing.org, as well as iTunes and Stitcher. And always remember to aim high.